No weapon could defeat her. No army could stand against her. But a single human kiss shattered everything she thought she knew. Elias Ward didn't belong here, and every pulsating wall of the legendary bioship made sure he knew it. The corridor beneath his boots throbbed like a living vein, bioluminescent patterns shifting with every hesitant step he took. Somewhere above him, the ceiling let out a low hum, as if the ship itself was gossiping about the fragile human wandering its halls. "Great," Elias muttered, glancing nervously at a nearby wall that rippled in response. "A ship with opinions." He adjusted his oil-stained jacket, a pathetic shield against the sterile perfection surrounding him. Just 48 hours ago, he was fixing a coolant leak on a cargo freighter. Now, he was an honored guest aboard the most feared vessel in the galaxy, courtesy of a diplomatic incident he still didn't fully understand. Something about a misplaced handshake and an legendary ambassador's offended antennae. Hovering beside him, a translucent orb chimed pleasantly. "This way, Engineer Ward. Her Majesty awaits." "Yeah, can't wait," Elias whispered, masking his dread with sarcasm. The doors ahead, if they could be called doors, peeled open like petals responding to sunlight, revealing a vast chamber that seemed to breathe. At its center stood Viola. She was impossible. Over 2 meters tall, draped in flowing bio-silk that shimmered like a captured nebula, her silver lavender skin reflected the soft light of the living throne beneath her. Eyes of molten mercury fixed on him, calculating, emotionless, yet disturbingly curious. "Elias Ward," she spoke, her voice smooth and resonant, like a melody played on an alien instrument tuned just slightly wrong to human ears. "The human who offended my court, and survived." Elias swallowed hard, forcing a lopsided grin. "Well, survival's kind of my thing. That, and fixing broken stuff." Her head tilted slightly, long, elegant ears twitching with mechanical precision. "Fascinating. Your species uses humor as a defense mechanism. We also use running away, but your ship seems to have eaten all the exits." He shot back before his brain could stop his mouth. A silence stretched thick and heavy until the throne beneath Viola pulsed once, as if amused. "You are inefficient," she concluded, stepping down with a grace that made gravity itself seem optional. As she approached, Elias instinctively took a step back, only to find the floor subtly shifting to keep him within a respectful or perhaps strategic distance. "Tell me, human," Viola continued, circling him like a scientist observing a peculiar specimen, "how does a species so inherently flawed continue to resist subjugation?" Elias blinked. Caffeine." Another ear twitch. "Caffeine," she echoed, as if cataloging the term. "Look," Elias sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, "I don't know what kind of game this is, but if you brought me here to study human resilience, I'm probably the worst example. I get winded climbing stairs." Viola stopped in front of him, towering, her gaze piercing through every layer of bravado he could muster. "Precisely why you intrigue me," she said, lifting a hand. The air between them shimmered as data streams projected holographic images, scenes of humans laughing, crying, embracing. "Emotion," she stated clinically. "Your greatest weakness. Yet, paradoxically, your greatest strength. I wish to understand it." Elias frowned. "You kidnapped me, for a therapy session. Consider it education, she replied, turning away as if the matter was settled. The orb, still floating loyally by his side, played a soft chime that suspiciously resembled a good luck tune. Elias exhaled slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Trapped on a sentient ship, at the mercy of a queen who viewed feelings as a scientific anomaly. Fantastic, he muttered to himself, glancing at Viola's regal silhouette. All I have to do is teach an emotionless alien overlord why humans cry at movie endings. What could possibly go wrong? The ship's walls pulsed again this time. Elias could have sworn it was laughing at him. Elias Ward had faced a lot of strange requests in his life. Once, a Martian trader asked him to fix a toaster that doubled as a philosophy tutor. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to standing in front of an emotionless alien queen as she calmly commanded, "Teach me your greatest weakness." He blinked. "I'm sorry, you want me to what?" Viola stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her silver lavender skin shimmering under the bioluminescent glow of the chamber. Her molten silver eyes locked onto him, unblinking. "You will demonstrate the core vulnerability of your species." Elias shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if an escape hatch might magically appear. "Right, well, where do I start? Taxes? Existential dread? The fact that we invented ice cream and heartbreak in the same century." Viola's head tilted, ears flicking slightly, a subtle sign he was beginning to confuse her, or worse, intrigue her. "Be serious, human," she said, stepping closer. "I seek understanding, not riddles." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Okay, fine. Let's see, friendship." He waited for a reaction. "Inefficient," she replied instantly. "Music. Subjective noise. Caffeine." Her brow arched ever so slightly. "Stimulant dependency?" Elias threw his hands up. "You're really not making this easy?" Viola took another step, now standing so close that Elias could see the faint, pulsating patterns beneath her translucent bio-silk attire like constellations shifting across her form. "Show me something real. Something human." His heart pounded. His brain scrambled for ideas, but every concept he knew would probably be dissected and dismissed within seconds. Then, in a moment of pure desperation and perhaps temporary insanity, it hit him. A kiss? It was stupid. Reckless. Possibly fatal. But as he looked up at the towering queen, her flawless composure and expectant gaze, Elias realized there was nothing more human than risking complete humiliation in the name of connection. He cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. "All right, but, you're going to have to trust me on this one." Viola's eyes narrowed slightly. "Trust is illogical." "Exactly," he muttered under his breath. Taking a deep breath, Elias stepped forward. The height difference was immediately a problem. He glanced down at his feet, then back up at her serene, unreadable face. "I'm gonna need you to, maybe lower your head a bit," he said, gesturing vaguely. Viola did not move. "Explain." Elias felt his face flush. "It's called a kiss. It's complicated. But let's just say it's a gesture of vulnerability." For a moment, he thought she might vaporize him on the spot for such insolence. But instead, after a pause that stretched his nerves to the breaking point, Viola inclined her head ever so slightly. "Proceed," she commanded. "Right, sure, no pressure," Elias muttered, his voice cracking. He stepped onto the tips of his toes, still barely reaching her chin. With a resigned sigh, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder for balance, a shoulder that felt cool and impossibly smooth, like touching starlight trapped in glass. His heart raced as he leaned in, aiming for her lips but miscalculating spectacularly. His nose bumped against her cheek, and for a horrifying second, he was fairly certain he kissed somewhere near her upper lip, or maybe her faceplate. Did she even have lips in a human sense? When he pulled back, Elias didn't dare breathe. His cheeks burned, and he was already mentally drafting his final words. Viola stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable. But then just barely one of her elongated ears twitched. Her fingers brushed her lips, as if analyzing the sensation. "That was inefficient," she stated, her voice softer than before. Elias let out a nervous laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, that's kind of the point." For the first time, Viola's gaze wavered, not with anger or disdain, but with something Elias couldn't quite place. Curiosity? Wonder? A silence settled over them, heavier than any lecture or command. The bioluminescent walls dimmed slightly, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Then unexpectedly a sound broke the tension. A soft, almost imperceptible exhale from Viola. Not a laugh. Not exactly. But something close. She lowered her hand, her molten eyes meeting his with a flicker of something new, something undeniably alive. "Fascinating," she murmured. Elias swallowed hard, unsure whether he'd just made first contact or signed his own death warrant. Viola took a step back, her posture still regal but looser, as if the perfect calculation that defined her every movement had momentarily faltered. "You will explain this further," she said, turning gracefully toward the chamber's exit. "Tomorrow." Elias watched her go, knees weak, heart still hammering. "Yeah," he whispered to himself. "If I live that long." The walls pulsed again, and this time, he could have sworn the ship was smiling. Elias Ward found himself in what could only be described as the universe's most bizarre internship. Every day, without fail, the translucent orb known as Gregory would appear at his quarters, humming an upbeat tune far too cheerful for someone being escorted to a session with an alien queen obsessed with human emotions. Today was no different. "Her Majesty awaits," Gregory chimed, its glow pulsing to the rhythm of Elias' reluctant footsteps. Elias sighed, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Yeah. Wouldn't want to keep the galaxy's most emotionally curious monarch waiting." When he entered the chamber, one that shifted design daily, as if the ship couldn't decide between a throne room or a meditation garden, Viola was already there, seated cross-legged on a platform of softly glowing moss. In front of her hovered a projection, a Terran playlist titled "Songs to Cry To at 2 a.m. "You willingly listen to this, while sad?" she asked without looking up, her elongated ears flicking in visible confusion. Elias smirked, taking a seat on a nearby bio-formed bench that adjusted itself to his posture. "It's called catharsis. Sometimes you need sad music to feel better." Viola's molten silver eyes narrowed. "Illogical." Reinforcing negative emotions should destabilize mental efficiency. Welcome to being human, Elias quipped. We specialize in doing things that make no sense. The past week had been a whirlwind of questions. Why did humans laugh when nervous? Why did they watch tragic stories for entertainment? Why did they eat food that burned their mouths and called it spicy delight? Viola wasn't satisfied with surface answers. She demanded demonstrations. Which led to yesterday's experiment, introducing her to pizza. Elias chuckled at the memory of the regal queen scrutinizing a slice like it was a diplomatic threat. She'd declared it a structurally unsound nutritional delivery system before reluctantly admitting it was acceptable. Today's topic, however, was emotional paradoxes. Explain why humans find humor in pain, Viola said, shifting the projection to a compilation of slapstick videos. Elias winced as a man on screen was hit by a flying object. It's complicated. Something about surprise and harmless misfortune. Viola watched intently, her expression unchanging until, for a fleeting second, one corner of her mouth twitched. Elias nearly fell off his seat. Was that a smile? Did I just witness history? Viola immediately composed herself, ears stiffening. It was a muscular anomaly. Sure it was, Elias teased, leaning back with a grin. But beneath the banter, he noticed it to shift. Viola spoke less like a machine and more like someone discovering the world anew. Her questions grew deeper, her posture less rigid. Yet, with every breakthrough, a shadow loomed larger. That afternoon, as they debated the concept of bittersweet memories, a holographic alert flickered to life mid-air. Gregory's glow dimmed as a stern voice echoed through the chamber. Attention, behavioral deviation detected. The Council of Elendary requests clarification. Viola's serene demeanor faltered for the first time. They are watching you? Elias asked quietly. Viola stood, her flowing bio-silk robes shimmering with subtle agitation. The Council monitors all anomalies. It appears. I have become one. Elias rose to his feet, concern replacing his usual sarcasm. Because you're laughing more? Because you like pizza. Her gaze met his, and for once, there was no regal distance, just a flicker of frustration and fear. Because, she said slowly, I am no longer predictable. The weight of those words settled between them. For a queen who ruled through perfect logic and control, unpredictability wasn't just dangerous, it was revolutionary. Elias took a cautious step closer. Is that bad? Viola didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out a gesture so subtle yet monumental and brushed her fingers against his wrist. The contact was brief, but it spoke volumes. It is unfamiliar, she admitted. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where two people realized they were standing on the edge of something neither fully understood. Finally, Elias let out a breathy laugh. Well, if it helps, unpredictability is basically humanity's brand. Viola's ears flicked a sign he now recognized as amused curiosity. Then perhaps, she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard, there is value in embracing it. As the bioluminescent lights of the chamber dimmed to a calming hue, Elias realized that teaching an alien queen about human emotion wasn't just changing her. It was changing him too. And somewhere deep within the living walls of the ship, Gregory played a soft melody, a tune neither entirely alien nor human, but something beautifully in between. When Elias Ward stepped into the simulation chamber, he knew two things for certain. First, that nothing good ever started with a queen saying, "I have designed a test," and second, he was absolutely not prepared for whatever was about to happen. The chamber shimmered around him, a vast dome of shifting light and quantum architecture. Reality bent here, molded by thought and intent. At the center stood Viola, regal as ever, but dressed not in her usual flowing bio-silk robes. Instead, she wore a curious blend of Terran casual, a soft tunic resembling a hoodie, and simple boots, as if the simulation itself had tried to approximate comfort based on fragmented human memories. "Welcome to the KISS Protocol," she announced, her voice echoing slightly in the malleable space. Elias groaned, rubbing his face. "You named it." "Designation is essential for clarity," Viola replied, stepping toward him with calculated grace. "You claim this gesture holds meaning beyond physical contact. I intend to understand why." The environment shifted around them, settling into a scene pulled straight from a romantic cliché, a quiet park at sunset, complete with cherry blossoms drifting on an artificial breeze. Elias glanced around, both amused and unnerved. "Really leaning into the atmosphere, huh?" Viola ignored his comment. "Explain. Why would a species create a ritual that exposes them to emotional vulnerability?" Elias sighed, shoving his hands into his pockets as he walked beside her along a simulated path. "Because that's what makes it matter. It's not just instinct or tradition. A kiss says, 'I'm choosing to be close to you, knowing you could hurt me.' It's trust." Viola stopped, processing his words with a furrow in her brow, a rare display of genuine contemplation. "So it is a deliberate surrender?" "Not surrender," Elias corrected gently. "It's connection." For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of non-existent leaves. Then, Viola turned to face him fully. Gone was the clinical curiosity from their first encounter. In its place was something far more disarming intent. "I wish to attempt this connection," she said, her voice softer now, almost uncertain. Elias felt his heart skip. "You sure? No royal decrees forcing this?" Her molten silver eyes held his, steady and clear. "Not obligation. Choice." The weight of that word settled over him. This wasn't an experiment anymore. Slowly, Viola closed the distance between them. There was no rush, no calculation, just a quiet determination. Her hand, cool and steady, reached up to lightly touch his cheek, a gesture she'd likely observed but never performed. Elias' breath hitched as he met her halfway, this time without the awkwardness of their first attempt. When their lips met, it was gentle, a question rather than a statement. The simulated world reacted instantly. The sky above rippled, colors bleeding into one another like wet paint. The ground beneath them shimmered with cascading light patterns. A low hum vibrated through the air, growing louder as if the very fabric of the simulation struggled to contain what it was witnessing. Viola pulled back slightly, her eyes wide not in confusion, but wonder. Her elongated ears twitched twice, a sign Elias had come to recognize as genuine emotion stirring beneath the surface. Before either could speak, a sharp alarm blared through the chamber. "Alert! Emotional resonance exceeds projected parameters, a disembodied voice intoned. Gregory materialized nearby, now humorously adorned with a tiny digital bow tie. Simulation breach detected. Recommend immediate disengagement. Viola glanced around as the world continued to destabilize, petals frozen mid-air, the sky fracturing into geometric shards. Fascinating, she whispered, almost to herself. Elias grabbed her hand instinctively. I think we broke your fancy program. Before Viola could respond, the simulation collapsed in a cascade of light, ejecting them back into the real chamber. The bioluminescent walls flickered erratically, and a larger, more ominous voice echoed overhead. The Council of Elendari has been notified of unauthorized emotional escalation. Await further directives. For the first time since he'd met her, Elias saw true conflict in Viola's expression, a queen torn between duty and discovery. They are going to react badly to this, aren't they? Elias asked quietly. Viola's gaze softened as she looked at him, their hands still linked from the simulation. They fear what they cannot predict, she admitted. Elias offered a half smile, despite the knot tightening in his chest. Welcome to the club. Viola let out a breath, not a sigh of frustration, but something closer to release. I understand now, she said. Emotion is not weakness. It is liberation. The chamber's lights stabilized, casting a warm glow over them. Yet the tension in the air remained, thick with the knowledge that their moment had not gone unnoticed. Elias squeezed her hand gently. So, what happens next? Viola straightened, the regal composure returning, but this time tempered with something new, a spark of defiance. Now, she said, we show them that choice is stronger than control. As alarms faded into a steady hum, Elias realized that a simple kiss had done more than bridge two worlds. It had started a quiet revolution. The first thing Viola noticed about Earth wasn't the technology or the people, it was the imperfections. The uneven roads, the unpredictable weather, the chaotic symphony of life that no algorithm could ever hope to organize. Standing in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa, her boots sinking slightly into the soft soil, she tilted her head to the sky. The air smelled of chlorophyll and something Elias called freshness. To her, it was disordered and beautiful. Elias watched her with a quiet smile, hands in his jacket pockets as the diplomatic vessel disguised as a weather balloon hovered invisibly above them. So, Your Majesty, he teased, first impressions. Viola took a slow breath, her silver eyes reflecting the endless blue sky. It is alive in ways I did not anticipate. The days that followed were a lesson in simplicity. Viola, cloaked in a subtle holographic veil to mask her more alien features, walked through the town's modest streets, experiencing humanity without pretense. She sat on a porch swing, feeling it creak beneath her weight as Elias gently pushed them back and forth. She listened to the hum of cicadas, her elongated ears twitching at the unfamiliar rhythm. She tasted lemonade, her reaction a subtle scrunch of her nose followed by a contemplative nod. At the county fair, she marveled at the concept of funnel cake, declaring it a structural disaster but a delightful one. Elias laughed more in those days than he had in years, watching the most feared queen in the galaxy struggle to understand the rules of a ring toss. But it wasn't just amusement. One evening, they sat beneath an old oak tree, watching fireflies blink in and out of existence. Viola reached out, cupping one gently in her hand, her expression soft with wonder. They emit light, she whispered, not for survival, but to be seen. Elias glanced at her, recognizing the deeper meaning in her words. Yeah, sometimes being seen is reason enough. Viola grew quiet, her gaze fixed on the tiny creature before releasing it back into the night. Yet, reality was never far behind. A week into their quiet escape, the message came as subtle ping on a device Viola always kept near. The council required her return. That final morning, they stood once more in the cornfield where it began. The ship shimmered above, no longer disguised, its sleek form a reminder of the world Viola belonged to. She turned to Elias, her usually composed face now shadowed with something far more human reluctance. I must go, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I figured. Galactic empires don't run themselves. Viola stepped closer, her hand reaching up to trace the line of his jaw, a gesture she'd learned without instruction. You showed me a universe beyond control, she murmured. One where imperfection is not failure, but freedom. Elias managed a small smile, though his chest ached. And you taught me that even the most powerful being in the galaxy can learn to appreciate bad lemonade and fireflies. A silence settled between them, filled with everything they didn't need to say. Finally, Viola leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips, not as a queen, not as a student of human emotion, but as someone who chose this connection. When they parted, her elongated ears twitched softly, a sign Elias had come to cherish. You changed me, she said. Elias looked up at the sky, the stars faintly visible in the morning light, and whispered with a smile, progress. As the ship ascended, disappearing into the vastness of space, Elias stood alone in the field, the echo of their shared moments lingering like the last notes of a favorite song. But it wasn't the end. Weeks later, messages began to arrive encoded in patterns of starlight, hidden within radio waves, and once, scribbled inside a fortune cookie that made no sense to anyone but him. Elias didn't return to his old life. Instead, he wrote stories about a queen who learned to feel, about the beauty of chaos, and the magic of choosing connection over control. And every night, before sleep claimed him, he'd glance at the sky, knowing somewhere out there, Viola was doing the same. Because some revolutions didn't need armies. Sometimes, they only needed a kiss, and the courage to embrace what came after.